Nice to connect with you all. Welcome, welcome. Yeah, so this workshop it's so abundant that I've actually named it 3 times. I named it God is in the Numbers, Money and Codependency, and Prosperity Masterclass. And so this is a workshop, I don't know if you gathered from the flyer, but it's a workshop in 2 parts. The way I've arranged it is that each is standalone, so you could attend each workshop independently. And then they also fantastically work together. Yeah. And so today we're going to be focusing on clearing out the old. And then in a month's time, 28 days time, we're going to be bringing in the gold. And there's some practices that I'm going to invite you to take part in between those two spaces, if you would like. So here's a sense of what we're going to talk about. So yeah, the reasons why we need to clear out the old before we bring in the gold. I'm going to share my own story, my own relationship with prosperity, and why I thought of this workshop in terms of why I wanted to bring together money and codependency in particular. How codependency, debting and under-earning all kind of join together in one kind of like smush of low self-esteem and vagueness, which then destroys our lives. A prayer to higher power to transform this so that we can be actually who God intends us to be rather than playing small. And then we're going to be doing some work to understand our own personal patterns of scarcity and committing to no longer being a mushroom, which will make more sense later on. I'll introduce you to some money recovery behaviours, and if you'd like to, there's some commitments and next steps. And yeah, like Jeremiah was saying, the workshop's going to be recorded, so you're able to revisit certain parts if that's helpful. I'm aware that I have, I've brought a lot to it, so it is quite rich in terms of material, hopefully, for you. And also to say that you will need some kind of writing material, whether you want to write on, your phone or laptop, the device you're using, or whether you want to use a pen and paper. We will be doing some exercises as a group in breakout rooms. Also, there'll be time for questions, there'll be time for sharing, and there's also breaks throughout. But as always, look after yourself. If you need a break, a comfort break, at a time that I haven't arranged, then feel free to take it. Yep. Look after yourself, as always, with CoDA recovery. Great. So yeah, I came across, I heard this quote the other day. I thought I'd start with this quote, and then I'm going to talk about my own experience, strength and hope for approximately 10 to 15 minutes. And yeah, but this quote, I heard this quote the other day. There's a meditation group that I regularly attend on a daily basis online, and the meditation teacher actually invites people to send in quotes, and this was one that was read the other morning. And this meditation group is at 8 a.m. and I'm not a morning person, and it just really struck me. Actually, it just spoke straight to my heart, and I was like, wow. And it actually motivated me it just really struck me. And I thought that this is really relevant for my codependency, my own experience with codependency, and my own experience with playing small, actually. Because it was pain was going on, pain from like it says in the welcome, the losses of our childhood, the devastating losses of our childhood, and then how that impacts, how that then rolls out in our life. And so I thought that was very powerful. Okay. So why do we need to empty out? Why do we need to clear out the old before we fill up with God's abundance? Well, in my experience, as you'll hear in my experience, strength and hope in a moment, I've always been very spiritually open-minded, and a lot of kind of abundance strategies, if you like, and prosperity methods and prosperity consciousness and mindsets, etc. A lot of them are based on kind of affirmations and intentions and vibrations and all those sorts of things. And that's great, that's great. But if you've got a bunch of shame, guilt, resentment and fear going on in your system, you're kind of full. And it's very hard, it's going to be very hard for any of those spiritual methods or any of those approaches to take like proper root and actually grow and actually transform in your life. That was my own experience. And so 2 stories, I think there's 2 stories that kind of reflect this, 2 short stories. One, which is sort of illustrated here, I don't know if you know of it. It's a kind of famous story that's told about a student that approached a Zen master to go and study with that Zen master, and the Zen master and him were having tea, and the Zen master said, "Oh, you know, can I have your cup?" And the Zen master started to pour tea into the student's cup, and then as it reached the full cup, and as the tea started to pour all over the brim, and it poured all over the table, and the student was covered in tea and was like, "What are you doing?" And the Zen master said, "Well, your mind is like this cup. It's full. And until we empty it, anything I teach you is going to be completely redundant. It's going to be completely useless because you're not going to have the capacity to take that in." And yeah, that's been my experience with with recovery. Actually, I actually needed to unlearn a lot of the behaviors that I came into recovery with before I could actually be filled up with my own higher powers will for me. There's actually also a short story that I'm just going to read. It's not from CoDA approved literature. If you want the details about it, I'll share my contact details at the end. It is from recovery literature, and it's a short story about a rocking chair. Okay, you might know it. It's a famous one. Okay. And it's actually related to steps 6 and 7, but I think it's relevant here. Okay. So we really need to consider the power of giving up. We can ask ourselves in a certain situation, what is it that I have to give up? We're always looking at what we're going to get, but we should look for what we're going to give up and be able to spot that way. It's usually simple. It's usually one of the character defects we've talked about. Here's how it works. When you get rid of a character defect, you are overcoming a shortcoming. It's practically automatic. By nature's law, there can't be a void. There is no void in the universe. Something rushes in to fill a void. So if you're willing to let go of a defect, the void it leaves is going to be filled by its opposite. Fear is going to be replaced with courage, resentments with love, tolerance, patience, understanding, and goodwill towards others. When you let go of one, it's not going to leave a hole, a blank spot. This positive thing will be there to take its place. Nobody had to teach me love, tolerance, and patience. I had never used them, but they were there. This process is sometimes frightening. I used to say to myself, I'm some kind of freak because I don't have that positive quality. I never have done that. Maybe I was created without the ability and I'll have to learn it. I didn't have to learn it though. When I got rid of other things, it was already there. And this is an example that he uses. I have a pretty rocking chair down in my office. When I first bought that building, someone had run off and left it behind. There wasn't anything there of any value, but there was this old rocking chair. It was just a horrible looking mess, painted black, with one of the rungs broken out of the back of it. I decided I'd keep it, thinking maybe one of these days I might put it together. Quite a few years went by, and so I did this kind of summary several times. Some of the guys tempted me to throw it away. For you to see. In fact, I found it round by the dumpster. So this is some of the differences between getting and under-earning, and they are in terms of kind of if you are interested in exploring. So I finally got this old rocking chair. I'll share my contact details at the end. So if you have questions that you don't want to share in the public space, feel free to. And I began to look at it, and I saw that it was really a fine chair. But you are welcome to share them in the workshop. I got some paint strip, and I began to strip it. I stripped all the paint away. But datting and under-earning, they're two different diseases, although they do kind of like that have been codependency as well. They all, I would say, they're all my experience is that all addictions. And I tore it off and I threw it all away. There was one broken rung, datting is more typically in these kind of outward, external, financially based behaviours. And these are kind of finally I took it to the these are my own definitions of datting and under-earning. I haven't taken these from the program websites. And if you are interested in looking at those programs, you know, I would suggest reading the symptoms and seeing if you identify. $350. But this workshop's kind of more about the relationship between codependency and datting and under-earning.
It was there all the time. But it was simply covered up.
Yeah, so datting's more this kind of compulsive spending, this chaos around money, making other people, making financial people into a higher power, making money into a higher power, making accountants into a higher power.
Over a period of years,
if we owe money to creditors, you know, maybe we've got an avoidant relationship with them.
Made a big mess.
Yeah, and those patterns of inferiority and grandiosity that I touched upon.
It's a program of getting rid of
money drunkenness, this sense of like vague kind of vague fog that we might be in around money, not really knowing how much
discovering,
comes in, not really knowing how much goes out.
Yeah.
But it's more of a transactional.
So first of all,
the difference between
today we're going to
hope you like that story. We're going to flush out and let go.
Under-earning's
and
more
empty
about
the cup
our relationship with
all
others
the,
in terms of how we
all the stuff that's actually getting in the way of our own abundance, our own prosperity, our own well-being.
Really doing what we're put
here,
on the
I found this
to do.
image
I
today.
believe, that we've each
so I was thinking about this workshop as a spiritual colonic, flushing out everything that you've learned about money so far, everything you've learned about your own value and your own sense of self-worth so
am I letting fear
and really
dominate
allowing
my life
yourself to be
and
reset,
doing a job that I hate,
from
for
today.
instance, or never getting to
so
play
I thought
the piano,
that we would begin with a prayer,
never trekking the Himalayas, or whatever the kind of whatever the sort of constant calling is.
Center yourself in your heart.
That's kind of ask, that's speaking to us.
Take a breath, and maybe let's
just. And I can come back to any of these slides.
Take a moment and just think about all the people that maybe need this workshop.
So I found this
reset in terms of in my creation of the slides. I found this on Google, and I really liked it. Actually, it's like ambiguity,
values,
and
thanking ourselves, and thanking yourself.
This is for me like this state of vagueness actually. Is a really important facet of like one of the ways that we self-sabotage. Actually, I think in codependency, getting and under-running and playing small
and closing your eyes,
we tend to be vague with our boundaries, vague with
praying to
what
your
our
own
needs
higher
are, vague with expressing our needs,
vague
with
today
exactly
help me to set aside everything I know about everything I think I know about you,
chasing an unavailable
everything I think I know about myself,
kind of job, if you like, going
everything
back to
I think I know about codependency
actually doesn't meet our needs, but we're kind of gathering
everything I think I know about
really
money.
Believe a higher power is going to deliver
everything I think I know about my own recovery.
So I like this.
I now pray for a new experience.
So one of the ways that we can start to kind of
a new
go through
experience
the spiritual
in my fellows
and flush out,
what
isn't working for us. Is starting to clear out, starting to identify and recognize where am I vague. That's always a really good question in my experience with working with prosperity is where am I vague? Because that vagueness normally leads me back to where I'm afraid or where I'm resentful or where I'm guilty or where I feel ashamed. There's some kind of big block there that's making me vague, that's making me foggy. And maybe, and the thing is that fogginess in my experience tends to love other fogginess, right? So like, how alcohol really enjoys cigarettes, like sugar really enjoys vagueness. So all these addictive characters, it's kind of like we used to have this advert here in England where it was for I think it was for bleach in the toilet, and it was like all these kind of germ sort of characters came out of the toilet and they were all kind of like friends together. And I sort of think about the kind of addictions like that being these sort of kind of characters that are all like kind of in cahoots together. Just keeping your eye on vagueness is even that is a great way to begin. Okay, so I was just thinking about images of abundance and how abundance is a really personal expression. Actually, what might be abundant to one person is not abundant to another. And then I started to create these charts around the similarities between codependency and debting and under-earning. And so I've created this one, and there's one on the next sheet too. And so I just touch on some of these points, but again, we can go back to them in the workshop if it's helpful for people, because I'm aware they're quite dense in terms of information. But so anorexically, not being clear or asking for what our needs are met as codependents, and then not asking for enough money or knowing how much we need each week, month or year to live on. So then because we're vague, because we don't know, then we might say, yes, I know I said yes to lots of under-earning jobs. And then I'd be like, hang on, this isn't even covering what my, like my basic needs. And I've signed this contract or whatever. And then, then that resentment that I would be feeling and that anger, that from that pinch, not allowing the flow of higher power, but instead pinching the straw, as they say, then that meant that I would act out. I'd act out in the job. I'd steal the printing, I'd steal stationery, I'd be late, I'd be difficult to manage, all kinds of things, all kinds of passive aggressive behaviors would come out of me because from this initial behavior of me not being clear about what I needed and what I could actually offer in relationship to that. So these kind of dysfunctional behaviors really are really helpful in starting to recognize where these diseases might be playing out and might be dominating us, and these can be places, things that we can take to our step work, things that we can take to our higher power to start to move on and beyond. yeah, so using others to self-abandon, which I'm sure many of you know is it's a pivotal behavior in codependency. And then, yeah, using spending or withholding to self-abandon. We might classically, we might spend too much, and then, then have a shame attack, go into a shame spiral, then go into guilt, then from that guilt, we might then go into fear, and then we might go into resentment, and then we go back to shame, so it's these kind of disappointing and sort of, yeah, they create unhappiness, yeah. Yeah, and then this kind of external compensation, this kind of, I guess, what would also be called other esteem in other sort of writing on codependency, the idea that we don't have that sense, that we don't have that core sense of self-esteem, which we would have from a healthy higher power relationship. And so then instead we kind of farm out that need for that to be met on external resources. We think, oh, if I have that car, if I have that boyfriend, if I have that job, then I'll be good enough, right? Then I'll look good, then people will want to know me. It's just classic kind of low self-esteem patterns, really. And that plays out in dysfunctional money behaviors as well as in codependent behaviors. Yeah, and then this is the second slide of this. Yeah, so vagueness about boundaries, like I was talking about. Playing God, yeah, fantasizing we can control others in the flow of love with codependency, and with money, playing God by fantasizing we can control money in the flow of abundance, rather than surrendering, right? Rather than surrendering to something greater than ourselves and accepting our higher power's will for us. Yeah, living on the edge by associating with unavailable, dysfunctional, and dangerous people and adrenalizing. And similarly with dysfunctional money behaviors, there can be a lot of adrenalizing. There can be a lot of, like there's a famous film where he, like, the wall is coming down and he just gets his hat, like grabs his hat like a second before the wall like smashes down on his hand, and it's like, I know I used to play a lot of games like that, a lot of knife edge kind of like paying things only, just when they were due, or, playing games with time and money. So I get a kind of adrenaline hit. Which was kind of replicating the adrenaline of my childhood. Yeah. Yeah. So, and of course, it's all anxiety driven. All this behavior is led by fear. It's not led by love. And it's dishonest too. It means, like all addictions, it means that we end up acting out of alignment with our higher power's will for us, acting out of integrity instead. There was a lot of dishonesty I was up to. I would steal things, I would lie, I could not be, I was not a trustworthy person with these addictions active in my life, because they would dominate my behaviors despite my best interests, because I'm powerless over them. Great. So I thought it would be great. I thought it would be powerful now to thinking about some of those themes we've been talking about, to reflect in your own life about how poverty and lack is showing up in your life now. So what I suggest is that you get some writing materials, or you write using your laptop or phone on some of these areas. So what I would suggest is that we're going to time for 5 minutes, and we're going to write on these areas. Actually, I think maybe 3 minutes, actually, Laura. Can we do 3 minutes, Laurie? Let's do 3 minutes. And just do it kind of rapidly. Just go, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go, these are suggested areas I've made so far, like home, self-care, romantic, friendship, just how fulfilled, if you like, you feel, how abundant and satisfied and nourished each of these areas feels, and then how poor and deprived, where, and then so that we can start to get a picture of where poverty and lack is showing up in our life right now. Okay, let's go. Yeah, so I was just touching on that, and I'm happy to talk a little bit about it more. But in my experience, I think what might be really helpful here is to get an understanding through personal inquiry. That often is what helps me get an understanding. And so starting to think about debting and under-earning and codependency as diseases, which they are, who else in your family line, your family lineage, might have this. So there's a theory, I don't know if you've heard it, that one alcoholic affects 7 generations because of all the codependency that substance abuse creates. And so alcoholism is often a result of trauma, some would say, and so starting to think about, where might inherited trauma and inherited poverty be in your lineage, and even if you are adopted or fostered, or like it's the family that you grew up. You can also think about the family that you grew up with, because that would have been a lot of the behavior patterns that you would have been witness to, right? And the beliefs. And if we're thinking about this as the spiritual colonic and flushing out beliefs that no longer serve us, then starting to identify these. So examples of inherited trauma and inherited poverty in my own life, and that that I recognized, I didn't recognize at the time, but sort of with hindsight, I can see, with things like, like I said, I had unsafe housing, there was abuse and neglect going on. I found it very difficult to get my needs met. Even when I first came into CoDA, I found it really difficult to get a sponsor. I found it really difficult to get people who would be reliable and would actually show up. I would settle for work below my skill and education level. I'd settle for work which was just work. There was also just like high levels of shame going on in my life. Which I didn't sort of understand, I didn't fully understand kind of where that was coming from. Even though I'd had a lot of therapy, it was only really when I got into recovery that I kind of got an understanding of like what was actually, where all of this was kind of actually coming from. And then also just other myriad addictions, such as workaholism, substance abuse, codependency, etc. Debts, enmeshment, I was talking earlier about enmeshment with my mum and how that played out. And also just vagueness. That's a bunch of vagueness, right? And so again, and a kind of easy kind of way into this might be just asking yourself these questions. And let's just, let's spend, I would suggest let's spend, maybe Laurie, can we spend 4 minutes on this? If you need longer, let me know, but just as a kind of, and I'm aware that these questions and this stuff is deep, right? So let's see this workshop as a springboard into deeper inquiry. And if you want to spend longer on the questions after the workshop, please feel free to come back to these questions. So I was starting to ask, how is fear impacting on your prosperity? And again, thinking of prosperity as a whole, as like a sense of wholeness, a sense of well-being, a sense of fullness, nourishment, feeling really like you're living your higher power's will, that you're doing what you're here on the earth to do. So how is fear impacting on this? How's guilt impacting on this? How's shame impacting on it? And how is resentment? Because I think these are the 4 kind of major blocks to living the life we're going to live. So if we do 4 minutes from there, thanks.
The timer went off. Sorry, it's time.
Great, thanks so much. Okay, yes, it's just starting to draw that to a close. This is a favourite saying of mine: "Let go or be dragged." It's a thing it says to me. Yeah. Like, anyway, I won't go into what I think is. Yeah. So I want to ask you, yeah, if you just take a moment to go inside. Actually, just go inside yourself. Just a moment just to have a moment of reflection and meditation. Just thinking about the impact of of inherited trauma, inherited poverty, the losses of your childhood, the trials and tribulations of life, whatever's impacted on you, just asking yourself, am I powerless over the impact of this? Am I powerless that the impact this has had on my sense of what is possible? Yeah, and just asking yourself, just taking a moment. And then I've written a forgiveness prayer. So again, yeah, closing your eyes if you want to, or saying it along with me if you want to, whichever helps you to feel the most connected. And surrender, this is the flush, so surrendering our old behaviours, our old thinking, our regrets, our resentments, our anger, our unforgiveness, actually, our unforgiveness. Higher power, thank you for your help. I want a new relationship with codependency, money, debting and under-earning that's in alignment with your will for me. Thank you for helping me to forgive you, myself and others for experiences of suffering, scarcity, lack, poverty, trauma and addiction. I am willing to forgive all that has offended me about work, money, finances, relationships, prosperity, supply and abundance. Within and without, I am willing to forgive. Money-related past, present, future, I forgive. I forgive everything money-related that can possibly need forgiveness. I forgive everything and everybody related to my prosperity, my inherited trauma and poverty, and anyone who can possibly need forgiveness in my past and present. I forgive positively everyone. I am free and all others are free too. All things are cleared up between us now and forever. And so it is. And again, just allowing that to land in your heart. And we're just reading. I'm just going to leave it here on the screen for a few moments, actually, just in case you want to. And if you want to reread it yourself, feel free to. Great. Okay, and I can come back to this. If people have a request for me to come back to this screen, I'll be happy to. So. Yeah, so this is the question we're now to ask ourselves. Now we've surrendered to a higher power's will, letting go and moving through and out of shame, resentment, guilt and fear. Are you willing to no longer be a mushroom? So mushrooms thrive and grow in the dark, like addictions. They thrive in dark, dank conditions. And so the more we can bring things into the light through recovery behaviors and move things out of vagueness and into clarity, the less our fears and our dysfunctional behaviors will be allowed to grow and mushroom. So the antidote, as I've touched upon, one of the main antidotes to vagueness is clarity. So starting to move things into clarity. So in this last section, we're just going to talk about some some behaviors to start to bring in some clarity into our lives, actually. And so, yeah, so this is a quote. Yeah, luck is infatuated with the efficient. It's a Persian proverb that I've heard over the years. And yeah, and it's this sense of that when we are really clear and when we move out of vagueness, it's like the universe conspires. It's like a higher power conspires to help us. And so some of the practices around this might be the way we approach things, actually, the way we approach our romantic life, the way we approach our finances. It's that energy of approach determines whether it has an energy of vagueness or clarity about it. I'll demonstrate what I mean. So let's go back to those. Let's go back to those areas that we were talking about before, and let's just spend, I'd say maybe 3 minutes, Laurie, if that's okay. Let's just do this quickly. Just 10 tiny changes that you can make in these areas of your life. And so, for instance, home. You know, what's the one thing in your home that's been bugging you? You know, maybe for the last year. What's the one aspect of your self-care that you never get to? What's one small thing you could do around the romantic? And if it feels like, you know, we're in the middle of a worldwide pandemic and you can't date right now or whatever, then, you know, maybe there's an ex that you could forgive or move on from, or, you know, send their CDs back or whatever, you know. So yeah, just thinking about and letting yourself be playful and imaginative and thinking about these 10 tiny changes. So go. Is it time?
23 seconds.
Oh, great. Time for 10 more changes. Thanks so much. Thanks for keeping time.
You're welcome.
So we'll come back to those in the sharing, but for now I want to introduce to you some money recovery behaviours. So just like the 10 tiny changes, these are large or small changes that are significant. And so between this workshop and the next workshop, I'm inviting you to start to think about which behaviours around this area of your life might be appropriate for you. So I'm just going to summarise some of these, and I'll go into some of them in a bit more detail. So, and there's time for questions and sharing if people need to know more. If anything isn't unclear, if anything feels vague, please let me know. So record keeping. So this is one of the kind of foundational tools of coming out of vagueness. So, and there's a particular record keeping methodology, which I'll explain in a moment and one of the next slides. But record keeping is about the essence of that is like starting to get really clear about where your money is going. And initially, you know, especially if we're approaching this from a place of fear or being told off, we can think that this is about some kind of external gaze looking at us critically, but it isn't. The idea of the record keeping is to get a sense of where you spend your money, but also where do you never spend your money? Like, you know, maybe you're spending all, you know, typically what most of us do is we fritter money, especially on food and on drinks. Yes, on, you know, like teas and coffees and things like this. A lot of money can go on those. Convenience, right? We can fritter a lot of our energy and our money in that way. And so getting really clear, like, but then we might, you know, so we might be spending loads of money on takeout coffee, for instance, but then never going on holiday, or always saying, oh, I don't have any time to have a massage, or, you know, oh, I don't have time to spend money on a hobby that we really love that gives us a lot of nourishment, actually. So record keeping, one of the great things about record keeping is the clarity that it gives us. It gives us a sense of what we're doing and what we're not doing. You can kind of almost observe yourself kind of behaviorally. It's almost like a step 4 inventory in a way, in that it gives you that sense of detachment and distance. And so with record keeping, it literally is writing down what you earn, and then also what goes out and where it's going. And there's kind of a suggested method for doing that, which I'll go into in a moment. Yeah, getting a financial overview. This is really good, especially if you have debts, actually. It can be really, one of the ways that kind of debts can hang around is through us not being aware of actually how much we owe and to who. And, you know, maybe, you know, sometimes people, you know, are avoiding opening letters, or they're avoiding checking a particular bank account, or, you know, there's just something left out. And these have normally got, in my experience, they're kind of like leftover step 9 amends, right? They often have a kind of charge, they might have an emotional charge to them, and that's why we're avoiding them. Sometimes, you know, things like if we get an inheritance from somebody dying, or there's finances or property connected to a relationship that ends, that can have a particular charge, or those objects or those or that money might have a particular charge, and so then there might be some avoidance around that. So doing a financial overview is literally kind of like what it says it is. And again, I've done a slide on it, so you can just get a quick glimpse of like what that might look like or feel like. But it's literally kind of like writing it out, like, right, in this account I have this, in this account I have this, in this account I have this, you know, so that we start to get really clear and grounded, and in relationships start to get some intimacy going on with ourselves and our figures. Attend DA. There's also a fellowship called BDA, which is Business Debtors Anonymous, which is for business owners. You might want to attend DA, BDA, or UA, or see if one of those fellowships resonates for you. Record storage. Yeah, that's also about how you store your receipts, how you store your finances. You know, some people like to, you know, go all out and, you know, buy some kind of golden box with red lining, or, you know, you know, other people, you know, so, you know, have a special cupboard where it is. Other people like to like cram it in the back, you know. So thinking about, like, and again, energetically, how can you move your financial life out of a space of vagueness into a space of kind of feeling held and loved, because that's what, you know, clarity tends to bring an energy of love and support to whatever we're doing, versus an energy of avoidance. Clutter clearing, getting rid of things that, you know, we've all got kind of things that have worn out, or that aren't working. and maybe we mean to get them fixed, but we don't. So either making a plan to get them fixed or letting them go, releasing what we don't need into back into life, so that then we can, like Laura's video, so that then it creates that energy of circulation, letting go and releasing what we, and then new energy can come in. It's only through letting go that we're able to make a space, make a vacuum for new things to come in. Prayer and meditation, bring some prayer and meditation to this area of your life. Perhaps, a lot of people have thoughts that, God isn't interested in money, or God isn't, it's not sacred to be financially abundant, or etc. We can have kind of stories, around it's not spiritual to be rich, etc. So, just those kind of stories that get recycled. And so bringing prayer and meditation into this space, and asking for your higher power's will for you and your higher power's vision for you here instead. Bookending is a tool that's also used in both, like in all money recovery, where and also in a lot of 12-step programs generally, where maybe there's a difficult action that you're afraid to take, and so you might typically bookend. You could call a fellow, or you could text a fellow, if prior agreed, and say, I'm going to do this now. I'm going to spend half an hour on cleaning my kitchen now, or I'm going to spend an hour writing on my book, or I'm going to spend 5 minutes playing saxophone, or whatever it is that's your heart's desire, whatever it is that's hard for you to get to, or I'm going to spend 20 minutes researching plumbers, or whatever kind of difficult task is sort of evading you, if you like, getting that recovery support in that moment. I find bookending, and you can, some people have bookending partners, bookending buddies, that they regularly bookend with. Creating a spending plan. This is something that's typically done in relationship with other fellows who have experienced strength and hope in this area. And it's different to a budget, because it's not about restricting your spending so much as really getting, and one of the ways that you can actually start a spending plan is thinking about your ideal spending plan. What would you love to spend on? Have to spend on clothes each month, travel each year, etc., etc. Like, what would you love your life to look like? And just starting to open out and starting to think about that then can often inspire intuition and new behaviors, new actions. It's like, okay, if I was a really prosperous person already, how might I act around this area of my life? How would I approach this friendship? How would I approach this job? Using imagination as a space of kind of speculation, before we actually tangibly manifest it in our lives. Pressure relief meetings are meetings, again, they're kind of they're attached to these different fellowships, but they're a meeting typically with 2 other fellows who've got more experience, strength and hope with you. And I know the first time I had a pressure relief meeting, I approached it almost like I was having a meeting with my bank manager. I was full of fear and tension and tears and everything, but actually what it is, it's 2 people going through your figures with you, and you talking to them about what your desires are and what your visions are and what you'd, or even just what's happening, and then they're making some suggestions. And it's a sacred recovery space where you begin and end with the serenity prayer, etc. Honestly sharing about what's going on in your life. Some people can be very private about money, which I totally understand, or private about areas of your life where you don't feel like there's prosperity. And just honestly sharing, or choosing those areas we talked about, maybe some of the areas that you rated lower, maybe doing some honest outreach calls about those areas and about what's going on for you in those areas, actually just starting to move the energy on it. Practicing healthy boundaries. We learn about that a lot in CoDA, so I'm not going to go into that too much more, but practicing healthy financial boundaries too, coming out of enmeshment. Moving into autonomy versus enmeshment, tradition 7, applying that tradition 7 and its principles to our own lives, being self-supporting and independent, versus relying on others. And time recording, I talked a little bit about that towards the beginning, where we start to get, there's a time recording app that I use, that if you're interested, then message me and I can talk to you about it. But some people do it on paper. It's the same as anything. It's, finding the methods that work for you. Leaving toxic jobs and relationships that will up your abundance and your prosperity right away. Committing to not debting one day at a time. And that means, in the program's terms, it means like not incurring any new unsecured debt. So unsecured debt is any debt that's not backed up with some form of collateral, like a car or a mortgage or, whatever. So not incurring any more unsecured debt. Like I was going into unsecured debt when I was living in my overdraft. And coming out of hiding. Yeah, one day at a time. Okay, so that's just a kind of summary of some of them that I thought. I'm aware there's a lot there, but just noticing like which ones kind of speak to you, if any do, just see if any of them, especially like, what do they say, like ones that you immediately attracted to and the ones that you are really repelled by. That's quite a good guide to go by, like, I definitely don't want to do that, you know. And letting go of the old, you know, just as a heads up, you know, this might bring up sadness, grief, confusion, other addictions. You may find yourself, hands suddenly in the cookie jar as you're addressing your finances, looking at your prosperity. There might be adrenaline withdrawal from coming out from those dysfunctional behaviors, fear, etc. But all of this is totally worth it, because on the other side, there's a whole new life waiting to emerge from us coming out of fear-based patterns of behavior. So God is in the numbers. So I think actually, I'm going to go into this bit a bit later, but I think my feeling is to choose 3 recovery behaviors, like I was just talking about, and then I'm going to suggest that we go into breakout rooms and we talk about what those behaviors are. I'm going to put them back on the screen. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to talk with your breakout buddies about which ones you're attracted to and why. And I'd like you to use your time to distill, and I'd like you to choose one if you can. If there's one that you're willing to, if you'd like to commit to starting to engage with between this workshop and the next one. And whether you attend the next workshop or not, you can use August 15th, which is the date of the next workshop, as a 28-day cycle. I'm a woman, so 28 days is relevant to me. And so using that 28 days to think like, right, which recovery behavior would be amazing for me to try out, for me to explore, for me to be really curious about starting to embed into my life. So maybe it's the record keeping, maybe it's the time recording, maybe it's the leaving toxic relationships, maybe it's doing an outreach call every day about your financial landscape, or your creativity and how stuck it feels, or your lack of sex life, or whatever it is, whatever needs moving. So I'd like you to choose 3 of these and talk about them with your breakout buddies, and distill it to 1 if possible. Thanks. So this combination, like I was sort of touched upon before, yes, of commitment and accountability, this combination actually creates great recovery. Because before 12 steps, really, I would often do the commitment. I would show up to the nuanced energy healing thing, or whatever it was that I was doing, or the 40-day meditation, or the affirmations, or the, whatever it was. But what I didn't have was accountability. And I didn't have the awareness of the fear, the guilt, the shame, and the resentment, and the fact that there was an addiction going on that I was powerless over. So instead, I was beating myself up because I couldn't control this area of my life, and then it was dominating me. So this relationship between commitment and accountability is huge. I was talking about when I was in preparation for the workshop with the committee, I was talking about potentially having a WhatsApp group between this workshop and the next one. And if people are interested in that, I can set that up, and I can I can add you to it. Because one of the things that, like I was talking about, is bookending, where you say, I'm going to do this, and then you follow up and you say, I did it. Even if it's 5 minutes, I know somebody actually that went on holiday by putting aside, they were in a lot of under-earning in their life. They were living back at home with their parents. Things were not flowing, and they hadn't had a holiday in years, and they put aside 50p here, so 50 cents there, like 50 cents a week, and they went on holiday from saving up using 50 cents, saving up 50 cents a week, and they went on holiday. They had this lovely holiday by themselves, and they called me when they were on the holiday, like absolutely ecstatic on this holiday, that they'd saved up for. And, so it's amazing, that's one of the amazing things about accountability and visibility, is you get to see people changing their life in all these remarkable ways, which is so inspiring. It's the same, same with being in CoDA and seeing how people change with the steps, right? So, sorry, I didn't mean to come out the screen there. So, shall we do some more sharing from the breakout rooms? Maybe what people discovered in the breakout rooms, what their experiences were, what people would like to commit to. And then I'm going to go into, I'll just do a brief, I'm aware of time, so I'll just do a very brief overview of some of the financial practices, 2 financial practices about how to do that overview and how to start recording your figures. So would anyone like to share their experiences of the breakout rooms, of the 10 tiny changes they want to make, of which recovery behavior they'd like to commit to over the next 28 days? I'm going to say out loud, the thing that I'm going to do over the next 28 days is I'm going to do some more honest sharing in my outreach calls, actually. Outreach calls used to be like like I was sharing, they used to be a fundamental part of my recovery, and I always do outreach, that's cool, but I haven't been doing like a consistent, like calling somebody every day about the stuff that's really getting to me or bothering me or that I'm powerless over. So I'm going to commit to doing that between that now and the next workshop. Be like organized, very, very cleanly, and so each person's different with it. So, but being able to, the idea is that we're able to get what we want ideally really is a sense of so that we're able to be directly in relationship with our figures, that it feels clean, that it feels clear, that we can draw this information out quickly and simply. And so, because the reason for that is that when we're clean and clear, there isn't really room for anxiety to exist. Yes, our figures may not be where we want them to be, but because we're in relationship with reality rather than a fantasy, of, oh, the figures might be up there, oh, the figures might be down there, but I don't really know. When we're in relationship with reality, that tends to be anxiety reducing. And then, and then getting clear on, what debt, if we have any debt, what debts we owe, what debts we owe, the name of the creditor, and the balance there as well. And so then the idea is that as you start to pay off your debts, you chip away at them, you can, like, each month you can see your progress by having a financial overview. That's kind of one approach. And then this record keeping basics, the idea is that you get, I'll show you my notebook, you get a little notebook. I quite like having things physically, so I tend to have it this way, but like I'll just get a notebook like this, and then I'll write in there, I don't know if you can see, like so you can see, like, spend, like, in one double page I'll have like what I've spent, and then the week before I'll have like what I earned. Yes. And so and we divide the month in this way, so week 1 is 1 to 7, week 2 is 8 to 15. So so then if the month has, and so if the month is, ends on the 28th, if it ends on the 31st, you bunch it into that last week, and then you just have an overview like this. And the categories, again, the categories are personal, and this is a process, but I just wanted to just sort of introduce it as a note, as a sort of notion of like what this could look like for somebody. So you might have like, food, your mortgage or your rent, your accommodation, your bills, how much you're spending on Southern tradition, all these categories. And then again, like I was saying earlier, then you get a sense of like, where am I spending, where am I never spending? And just starting to get a sense of what your reality is, what your current reality is, because, like I was saying earlier, awareness is the first stage of change. So by becoming aware of where we're spending money, where we're never spending money, then we can start to be like, well, actually, do you know what? I have this huge passion for, I don't know, protecting cats, and yet I never ever give any money to the Cats Protection League, or, so it's like, by getting a sense of where our money is going and never going, we can also start to match up our spending and our behaviors with our belief systems and our values, actually, rather than sort of, giving tons of money to companies that we don't necessarily support ethically, or so on and etc. So but I'll leave it on. I'll leave it on this page in case people have like particular questions about it, or people want to look at it. But I'll also share my contact details, so if there are questions, then after the workshop, then feel free to ask me. So the next workshop, I was saying, is on the 15th of August. Here is my email. rhonarecovery@gmail.com. Yeah, if you have any questions about any of the issues, any of the points that I raised, you know, around money, prosperity, codependency, debting, under-earning, you know, I'm aware they're large topics, but yeah, if they've instigated or inspired thoughts in you, or if you have questions related to some of those subjects, yeah, feel free to ask me, because I've been in money recovery a long time and I'm happy to help people. I've also done a lot of work with newcomers around this subject, and because I had a rock bottom, I'm always very happy to help people because I know what it can be like. Yeah.